how do I get my wife to initiate more? How do I get my wife to want to have sex as much as I want to have sex?
I really have a hard time kind of getting it up. He's mad at me because I never initiate sex. I feel constantly guilty. I wish I had more desire. Any man who's over 40 should be pumping a couple of times a week.
The most common questions I receive, either sex is painful, sex just isn't enjoyable, it's just something I can live without it now. I used to like it, but now it's like, he doesn't really care and I don't really care and we're all good.
We have hypervigilance, and estrogen makes us look at everything. It also makes us judgmental to keep ourselves safe. That judgment reflects back to ourselves and we're like, my butt is fat, my boobs are saggy, I don't feel sexy, I'm not really attractive, when in reality we are all so beautiful. The good news is you're not alone. These are the human condition. And the even better news is I got answers. I got answers for all this stuff.
So today our guest is Susan Bratton. She is a sex expert. She's somebody who's helped millions of couples bring excitement and intimacy into their relationships.
It was great. I polled my audience, the guys, to ask them some questions. They had all kinds of questions about ED and performance and like how to get their wife to initiate sex. And she had answers for everything.
Yeah, she gave like a lot of solutions. So, if this is the type of conversation that's really uncomfortable for you and you're not comfortable hearing adult language, then this is probably not your episode. It's not something that we were terribly comfortable with initially. It takes practice. You start to realize, like, wait a second, we're adults. This is something that's really healthy and it makes our relationship better. And we shouldn't have so much taboo and awkwardness around it.
And she's going to explain what the value of having a good sexual relationship with your partner is for longevity, health, everything. That's how she starts off the podcast.
It's kind of interesting. And so you listen to the Chalene Show because you are focused on, you are determined to be healthier. And that means your mental health, your physical health, your spiritual health, and hopefully after today, your sexual health. Susan, one of the things that I had, thought about when preparing this for this interview was, how do I kind of keep things really comfortable for that person who is really uncomfortable talking about sex, but yet she also knows she wants closeness to her partner. She knows it's important, but she just is like super uncomfortable with all of this, the talk about it. Is there a way we can have this conversation where, I don't know how to make it generic, but like with innuendos, and so that person is less uncomfortable, less awkward?
The thing that people like the most about me is that when I'm done, they're like, how do you have so much courage to speak like that? I feel like for the first time in my life, someone spoke to me like a grown-up adult. Thank you for the frank talk. And so I can try really hard not to trigger anyone. But the problem with that is that the people who are listening to this episode, if you title this episode about intimacy, sexuality, keeping your marriage spicy, most of the people who have given up on their sexuality are not even going to tune in. And then we're kind of limiting the conversation for what I would call maybe not in a negative way, but like the lowest common denominator. When in reality, what you have are the people listening who are like, I got to fix this. It's not going as well as I want. I know I could do better. Just tell me what to do.
Okay.
And
get something out of it.
I'd rather just do that with you, even if at the end of the conversation, I'll do my best for you. And the last thing I want to do is trigger people. I don't want to. But if at the end of this conversation, you're like, Suze, I can't run that. I'll be like, that's cool.
We have listened to so many episodes that you've done and said exactly what you just said. Like, wow. Like literally, I said to Bret after listening to one of your episodes, I go, I feel like I've been operating with the knowledge I had as an 8th grade girl until I listened to you.
Yep, exactly. And here's the thing about our sexuality. Your sex life is so healthy and good for you. I mean, it reboots your nervous system. It sends blood, healthy, oxygenated blood to your brain. It releases neurotransmitters. It literally, there's a study that 2,500 people were shown pictures of people between the ages of 18 and 80 and asked to guess their age. And there was this group of people that everyone guessed to be about 8 to 10 years younger than their actual chronological age. And for a long time, the research was a European study, and they realized that they had intimacy 3 times a week. And if you think about looking 10 years younger on the outside, that's an indicator that you're 10 years younger on the inside. What are the big things we need to know so that we can move toward having more frequent, more pleasurable, intimate connection? What does that look like? Where are we getting tripped up? And I think that's a reasonable conversation to have. It's like, it's good for you. How do we have more?
Speaking of that correlation, is there a correlation between the amount of sex that people have and their physical health? I mean, your sexual health, is that tied to your physical health?
Literally tied. There's a really interesting longitudinal study. Actually, it's one of the longest studies on longevity that's ever been done, and it's based out of New Zealand. It's called the Dunedin Pace Report. And there's 4 quadrants to longevity. One of them is looking more youthful than your peers. The other is grip strength as an indicator of overall strength. The third is balance, being able to stand on one leg as, something that prevents you literally from falling down, breaking a hip and going into a home and dying. And the fourth is cognitive function. And the great news about great sex is that it makes you look younger. It keeps you stronger. It improves your cognitive. I mean, it literally works on all 4 quadrants. People are really kind of in the right here, right now in situations such as, my husband wants sex all the time, way more than I do. I really have a hard time kind of getting it up. It's, he's mad at me because I never initiate sex. I feel constantly guilty. I wish I had more desire. I took some hormones. It didn't really get me more desire. I don't know what to do, that kind of thing. Or they come to me, I'm so bored with our sex life. My wife will never do anything fun and new, or my husband will never do anything fun and new. That's a common one as well. Or my partner has a health problem. And your libido is the other side of the same coin as your overall health. You can't have a strong libido if you're dealing with cancer, or you have a chronic disease, or you've got long haul COVID, or whatever, it is. You can't do it. So what do I do in a relationship where I know my partner is too ill, but I feel so lonely and disconnected? Is there anything I can do, and so these are very common issues that I can easily resolve. So if any of that resonates with, I think those are maybe some of the things that my fans are dealing with. I'd be happy to go anywhere there.
Well, what's great is we've got this great audience that they submitted questions. The guys submitted questions to Bret, and the gals submitted questions to me. And
you just hit about almost all the questions just right there. Just your last 1 minute was like, I was like, oh, they asked that question. They asked that question. They asked that question. Yes.
You should probably be a sex expert. You should think about that. I think that if I had to generalize, and I'll let you generalize what the most common was for the guys, but for the gals, the most common one, and this likely has a lot to do with the fact that my lifer is like me. She's like my age. So she's probably perimenopausal, if not menopausal. And the most common questions I received, and I'll let you address this, and then we'll get to Bret's, either sex is painful, sex just isn't enjoyable. It's just something I can live without it now. I used to like it, but now it's like he doesn't really care and I don't really care, and we're all good, I think. And, so especially for the woman who's like, it's painful, it's uncomfortable, and therefore my libido is low. What advice do you have for her? You want to share yours? So
some of my questions were very similar, but probably the biggest one was, how do I get my wife to initiate more? Yeah. Another one was, how do I get my wife to want to have sex as much as I want to have sex? Yeah. And then some other ones came into like performance. So pre-ejaculation, ED. So, because, 54 years old, I'm 53. Some of our people are 50, 60. So the ED question's coming in. So I got quite a few questions about that as well.
The good news is you're not alone. These are the human condition. And the even better news is I got answers. I got answers for all this stuff. So the best way for me to answer this, what I would call mismatched libido, and then the physical aging issues that come with being in midlife and beyond, and how you can reverse those. There's solutions to that. And the best way I can explain it is to get in each other's world so you understand what you're dealing with. So the first thing is that, think about it. Now, I'm going to talk about men and I'm going to talk about women.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to just say right up front that I am very supportive of people's gender expressions, but that we're typically born into an XX chromosome, female-bodied, vulva-owning, estrogen-dominant person, which I'll call a woman, an XY chromosome, penis-owning, testosterone-dominant man.
Mm-hmm.
And they're almost always in the big bell curve of sexuality in a relationship together. And so I'm just going to deal with that paradigm. Anyone who's not in that paradigm can still get 90% of what I say. And the issue is that our male-bodied partners, our guys, they wake up at night with an erection if they're healthy. They have a couple of nighttime nocturnal erections. If they stop having those, the next stop on that train is called cardiac arrest. So monitoring nocturnal erections with devices, which I can get into in a minute and show you a few things, is actually very helpful in midlife to begin to understand that you have to watch that. If you're not waking up with a good old morning wood, you are likely on the road to you are already having atherosclerosis, which leads to heart disease, heart attacks, strokes, etc. So that's a really important thing, is you need a morning erection. So let's say you're having morning erections, and then men are biologically wired to solo pleasure, to keep their semen topped up. Our fire keepers are so important, but it's hard on them because we female-bodied people, we run on that 28-day cycle even after menopause. We are moon women. And so when we get in the mood, we are not what you would call spontaneous desire people. We are what are called responsive desire people. It means that if you start the process of seduction, and seduction is not a bad word, it's a good word. It is a needed word because we need our guys to do the heavy lifting to get us going because they have a penis that gets hard really fast. It has 3 chambers in it that just bink, they get fat, as if they're healthy, they're fast. And all that erectile tissue in the penis is, if I took out the erectile tissue of a penis, imagine it's a banana, the whole inside is fruit, all the fruit is erectile tissue. Okay. That's how much erectile tissue is in our male partner's penis. If I took that out and I turned it into a little circle with a point on the top and I popped it around our vagina, it would be that much tissue. But boys have a competitive advantage. They have a competitive advantage that those erectile tissue chambers are like straight shots and the blood can just run right in there. Yeah. Boop, and they're ready to go. Yeah. They're already testosterone dominant. They wake up with erections. They think about sex a lot. They're more likely to self-pleasure. And so they're just kind of always thinking about sex and pretty much always ready for sex. That's the biological wiring of man. The female body, we've got nooks and crannies. And those nooks and crannies take a long time to get our blood flow down into our pelvic bowl, seeping through the vaginal lining, seeping into the 3 erectile tissues of our vulva. We have a clitoral, urethral, and perineal structure that kind of mirror the male body, but they're in all these nooks and crannies. And so they fill more slowly with blood. And so what happens is we're not testosterone dominant. So testosterone is the hormone of lust. The problem is that guys over time in long-term relationships, they make us a big offer. They say, would you like to have sex? They initiate. And we say, I don't know. I'm not sure. I've got a lot going on. I should get this thing done. I still need to make dinner. Whatever. We have all these things because we're estrogen dominant and we've got all these things going on in our head. We have hypervigilance. And estrogen makes us look at everything. It also makes us judgmental to keep ourselves safe. That judgment reflects back to ourselves and we're like, my butt is fat, my boobs are saggy, I don't feel sexy, I'm not really attractive, when in reality we are all so beautiful inside and out. And we're so lucky to live in these miraculous bodies that we have. But our crazy estrogen makes us almost turn on ourselves in this negative mindset.
For a second, jump in and address that woman who's like, why do I want these ninja tricks? Why do I want to learn all this stuff to do something that's painful?
So the problem is that sex is too big an ask. Intercourse. I haven't even like laid down and relaxed and had a glass of Chardonnay yet. And he's asking me if I want to be penetrated, it's just like so much for us. So what I say to guys is a couple of things. Number one, you want to make her a series of small offers. And she, would you like a glass of Chardonnay? Can I give you a foot rub? Do you want to tell me about your day while I rub your neck? And he's going to go, she's going to know I'm trying to get sex. And I'm like, well, of course she wants to know you desire her, but she's not ready to say yes to intercourse, but she would be ready to say yes to a glass of Chardonnay and a foot rub. And when you begin there, it allows her to relax and let down and let the juices start running and let the flow happen and connect her heart to your heart and get things off her chest that are bothering her. Sometimes it's a matter of just being held for a few minutes, a long few minutes, and then you can relax rather than this kind of like big sex offer. The other thing that I say to guys is, do you or your wife take out the trash? Well, I do. That's my job. If there's a rat in the house, a mouse in the house, a spider in the house, a bug in the house, a snake in the house, who takes care of it?
Bret does.
Well, I do. Yeah. I kill all of the things. Okay, who initiates sex in your house? Well, I wish she would, but I pretty much always have to do it. And I'm like, what if it was your job? What if it was just like, awesome. If she happens to like take a bag of trash out or squish a spider or initiate sex, what if it's your job and it is your job to carry the fire? You're the fire carrier.
And I assume that what you mean when you say this holds true whether it's him or her. In some of the questions I got were the opposite, which was the woman saying like, how I wish my husband would initiate. He wants it, but I feel like I always have to initiate it. And it reminded me of this kind of resentment that I used to have because I was the friend in my girls' friend group that always planned the trips. And then at one point I just realized like, well, that's just my role. And I'm a control freak anyway, so I probably wouldn't like it if somebody else planned it. So I should just like step into my role.
You're so fair about that. Yeah.
I wonder if men, when they feel like they are the only ones that initiate, if they're getting initiating and like taking control, like confused, like for like the male or the man might initiate sex, but maybe what he really wants is once the initiation happens for then the woman to like take control of the situation in bed. And maybe that's what's not happening. I don't know. Yeah, because I think initiation and taking control are totally two different things.
I would say with initiation, the best thing to do is to keep making her offers, smaller offers, and then escalating those offers.
Can you give us an example? What's an offer? Is it like literally, will you have sex with me? Or is it the rub, like what you said, rubbing the back, a long caress?
Yeah, what I already said. Those are small offers. Those are the small offers that let her slowly remember that she loves to be close to you and want a little bit more. And then you offer her a little bit more. How about a yoni massage? Why don't we go into the bedroom? I've got the fire on. I've got the fascinator down. I've got a pitcher of water and some clean towels. I've got your favorite lubes out. And I'd just like to give you a yoni massage or a back massage or a butt massage or just a sensual body massage. And if you don't want to go further, I'm not going to be mad. I just want the opportunity to get into a sensual space with you. So let me love on you. That works very well. I have found that
Heck yeah.
yoni massages have been a Rosetta Stone to much more frequent intimacy between my husband and I. Look, I'm a sex expert. I talk about sex all day. I write passionate lovemaking techniques. I'm sexually confident. My genitals don't hurt because I've done the remediations because I am 62. But at 62, I'm having the best sex of my life. And yet, I don't really initiate much. I really prefer my husband to do that, but I don't like him to ask me to have sex. I like him to offer me pleasure. I like him to offer me yoni massages because one of the things he's really, really good about is no strings attached pleasure. I'm not giving you a massage to get you to have sex with me. I'm giving you a massage.
Every woman right now is like, how do I get one of those? How do I have one of those giving pleasures without any strings attached kind of guy?
Because what women need is to be filled up with pleasure to the point where it overflows and we have enough pleasure in reserve to give pleasure back. That's the first step, is to really just put in without it being a quid pro quo.
I have a question. Susan, does this, if I'm hearing you correctly, what you're saying is he doesn't even need to ask if he just focuses on your pleasure without the thought that there's going to be some reciprocation, because it'll be so overflowing that you will be begging for it.
She begins to want to reciprocate. And the more sex that she has over time, and not sex, but when I say sex, I don't mean intercourse. I don't even like the words foreplay and sex because that means the goal is intercourse and sex is only intercourse. And all the rest is just this less important thing called foreplay. I don't think that's true at all. As a matter of fact, the kissing, the holding, the stroking of each other's genitals, the pleasuring of her breasts, those kinds of things are very vulnerable, very pleasurable, and they can certainly be very orgasmic in and of themselves. And she needs 20 or 30 minutes of concerted pleasure to get her genitals to the point that his get to in 2 minutes. And so what happens is when couples have been rushing to quote unquote sex, rushing to intercourse, then they are shortchanging her arousal ladder. And then she's being penetrated before she's fully engorged, before she has her lady erection. And that means that the surface area of her genitals is small instead of big. And when it's engorged with blood and she's gotten that 20 minutes of pleasure, which is why yoni massages are so good, they filled up with blood. They're much bigger. When you touch them, there's more surface area, which sends more signals to her brain, her largest sex organ. And there she's feeling more pleasure. And then she can also, once they get to, if they decide to have intercourse, once they get to intercourse, she'll have much more pleasurable intercourse because that banana's worth of erectile tissue that's wrapped around her vagina is actually fully expanded. So she's getting a lot more signals to her brain of pleasure. And she'll be able to finally, if she hasn't yet, in her life had orgasms from intercourse, she'll start to be able to become orgasmic from intercourse. So priming the pump with the other types of orgasms, the manual orgasms, the oral orgasms, the breast-gasms, the kissing-gasms, getting her really turned on and telling her she's beautiful, telling her she's sexy, encouraging her. The verbal, for her, moaning, saying what feels good, letting him know he's doing a good job, letting him know her desire is building. Those are the signals that he needs to know that he's on the right track and that she is happy. Because the last thing he wants to do is have sex with her if she's not enjoying it. He doesn't want that. He wants her to want it. Once that mechanism between them starts really going, then She might initiate sex once in a while, but if she doesn't, it doesn't matter because you're going to be making her all these offers all the time. You're going to have a great yoni pleasuring. She might want to try lingam pleasuring, which is his, male member, pleasuring his male member. And you're just going to start having more fun together, and you're going to want to learn new things. And then she's going to become more sexually confident in herself and her abilities to achieve pleasure during the session. He's going to realize he can slow down and that he doesn't have to stay hard through the whole thing so he can get to intercourse and do what he's supposed to do. His performance anxiety is going to drop. And he's got so much performance anxiety because he feels guilty about his desire. He feels ashamed for wanting so much. He's been rebuffed so many times that he's worried. And so he just wants to get it done and do a good job. So he doesn't take too long. And so he puts all that pressure on himself. So when you get out of, we're just driving to intercourse, so we're going to have sex and we're doing intercourse. And instead it's like, we're going to lie in bed and we're going to goof and laugh and maybe try a new toy together and maybe do a position we've never done and try a new thing. Then you get into free-flowing communication, lots of feedback, joy and pleasure, lowered anxiety, more presence with each other. And you start to have fun again. And then you have a renaissance in your sex life. And then all of a sudden it's like, I've been thinking I would like to find my G-spot, or I'd like to try this sex position. And then you're starting to do things together. And then when you're beginning as beginners, it's like teenage sex again. And it's fun. So that's kind of the course of what could be happening when you understand that he's ready to go, she's not. It takes her 20 minutes. It takes him 2 minutes. Get off the thing of focusing on just having intercourse. That's not what sex is. Sex is all the things. Let's start doing some of the other things. It really just changes that dynamic, and stop feeling guilty for your desire, and stop feeling guilty because you don't have desire. You just need your partner's help to kind of get over the hump and get things warmed up, get the motor running. He's got to kickstart that old motor and get her going every time. And if he's like, oh, that's my job.
It really seems to me from what you've described that probably the biggest problem in most people's bedrooms is that they're trying to start it in the bedroom, that it needs to start outside the bedroom, that it needs to start, before you get into bed, especially because from what you've described, so much of our problems are that we have different starting points, like they're mismatched starting points. And she needs to start far earlier, maybe even in the day. And hers needs to kind of be, it feels like almost a lifestyle. and his needs to be like, okay, we're ready. Well, if that's the case, then, you got to make sure that things are a little bit slower for us.
Yeah. When guys say to me, what's the number one sex technique? I say, slow down. And they're like, no, really. And I'm like, no, for real. Yeah. Turn around and come back and get us. We need you to hold the fire, start the fire. You are the fire starter for us most of the time. I mean, in new relationship energy, that's a carve out. She could be the one who's, like all the time, but that wanes. And then we need more support.
Yeah. For the gal who is, and I'm sure it's very independent, right? There's probably many factors, but can you generally tell us what's going on that so many women in my audience have told me, I used to love sex, but now it's just really painful. What's going on there?
Yeah. So that's a couple of different things. The first thing that is the same thing that afflicts men. So it's loss of blood flow. So it's basically vascular retraction. And then with vascular retraction comes retraction of the nervous system. So the sensitivity drops as well. It doesn't feel as good as it used to feel. It's harder to achieve pleasure, and the pleasure is not as strong and intense. It's diminished. And the second thing that happens is that when you hit midlife and you're making less estrogen, the tissue all over your body is thinning. Your tissue gets thin and it begins to desiccate and wrinkle. That includes the vaginal mucosal lining and all the tissue of the vulva, as well as the tissue of the penis. It atrophies. And that atrophy makes the vagina, the tissue in the vagina thin and lax. And when it's lax, what used to be, I have a vagina right here. So this is what a vagina looks like. It looks like a little balloon that you'd make a water balloon out of. One of those little round balloons with a little neck and the little sphincter muscle that is the opening to the vagina. And the vagina itself is like a flat little balloon. And as it loses tissue, it starts to get more and more open. And then she loses her grip and her muscular strength and the orgasmic contraction strength as well. She also starts to suffer from incontinence, leaking urine, coughing, can't quite get all the way to the bathroom before some urine goes in her pants. These are problems that women have. So she has loss of lubrication, incontinence, vaginal laxity, sagging genitals, my favorite, and loss of orgasmic intensity and difficulty achieving orgasm. He has atrophied penis, shrinking, everything getting smaller, loss of blood flow, so less veins, less sensitivity, so it's harder for him to get to his climax. So, and that's a real problem. So he gets smaller, she gets bigger. They both lose sensation. He has to go at it a long time. She's got sensitivity and loss of lubrication, so that hurts. It's just like if Mother Nature could have come up with a more devious scheme to keep us from having intercourse in old age, she couldn't have done a better job. The good news is that you can fix all of these things. I'm going to tell you how to very simply in just a second. But this is what we are all going through. Nobody gets out alive. It happens to all of us. Our genitals atrophy. And so what we do with sexual biohacking and sexual regenerative therapies is we reverse the atrophy. And the way that we do that is pretty simple. I'll show you a couple of things. The very first thing for our female-bodied people is there's two options. There's a DIY and a do-it-for-me solution. The do-it-yourself, the DIY, is an at-home device, and I'm very happy to have this device. This is a women-owned business. This is called the Vagina Device.
That's the actual term of it, a Vagina Device?
It's at vaginadevice.com. And this uses red light therapy, photobiomodulation, to stimulate the mitochondria in the cells of the vaginal lining to generate more lining and thicken the tissue and fix the laxity. Then the tissue holds more fluid, more liquid from our blood plasma, so it has better lubrication. And this also has warmth, which recollagenates the tissue. And it has a small vibration that is essentially Kegel toning for strengthening the musculature so that we have more orgasmic pleasure and we have less incontinence. So the Vagina Device is at home, but one thing that it really doesn't fix is the loss of the labial tissue, the atrophy of the labial tissue, and the atrophy of the clitoral tissue. And that's why if you can do it and it's near your house and you have access to it, I recommend Femi Wave. Femi Wave is an acoustic wave that is applied to the whole outer vulva by a trained practitioner. It penetrates deeply into the tissue and fixes all the problems I mentioned before, all 5 of the issues.
Including lubrication?
Lubrication, incontinence, thinning, vaginal laxity, painful sex, loss of lubrication, labial, like the sagginess, as well as it strengthens the clitoral, urethral, and perineal erectile tissue structures so you can get all that blood in again, get that nice and engorged, and it feels good and sends those pleasure signals back to the brain. Everything's plump and youthful again.
Is the second option, is that like a once a quarter, like once a year?
Yeah, it's 6 treatments over usually 3 to 6 weeks. And what they're doing is stimulating the vulva and vagina with tiny little micro damage. These little acoustic waves go in and they do tiny little damage that then your body brings in your own growth factors and stem cells to repair and rebuild the tissue. It's like build back better is what it does. Same thing for the male member, and that's called Gaines wave. And the reason that I like the acoustic wave over things like CO2 lasers and RF devices is that the CO2 lasers, again, only doing the internal vagina.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah.
fixing sensation loss and the loss of the labial tissue. And it is very damaging. It essentially is a laser that burns your tissues. So your vaginal mucosal lining gets wounded. What I like about the Vagina Device is that it does not do any wounding to do the repair. It's just a plus up rather than a wound repair.
How much of the issues regarding, for the woman who, again, she recognizes that, gosh, I'm just much drier than I was before. She's not, and so therefore her husband also thinks, well, she must not be turned on because she's not getting wet anymore. What do you recommend in terms of hormone support? Is that potentially one of the issues?
For sure. And I like vaginal estrogen and I like testosterone to be able to be put on the clitoral structure and on the inner labia. And if you add a little testosterone to your life, you don't turn into a little old lady so fast. You don't turn into a granny that's afraid of everything. You have more muscle dimension. You stay stronger. You've got more. You've literally got balls. You've got more confidence, and you have more sex drive. And then the estrogen, when you take it intravaginally, it thickens that mucosal lining and helps it hold in more fluid. And the thing about lubrication is, Dr. Emily Nagoski wrote in her book, Come As You Are, she wrote about the gassing and braking system of female arousal and how lubrication is not an indication of desire. The problem is that when you're dry, it impacts your desire. So I like the Femi waves because I literally have, so I started doing O shots, Femi waves, things like that, and using the Vagina Device probably about 55. I started needing that. I started having painful sex, loss of lubrication, etc. And now I have so much lubrication that I'm more lubricated now than I was in my 20s. So there's one more thing that I would like to recommend, and I can have some of this sent to you. This is a system that I recommend to women and their partners a lot, and it's called Foria, and it's a CBD-based botanical oil system. I call it the Pleasure Protocol. And this is the Awaken. And it's an oil that you just put a coating on the vulva. You just put a coating on the clitoris, the vulva, etc. And then for more lubrication, you take one of their little cocoa butter CBD suppositories and insert it into the vagina. It melts inside the vagina, coats the vagina. Wow. It's nice and thick and it feels wonderful. So then you add their sex oil on top of everything for as much slipperiness as you like. But what the Awaken does is it actually, so you have in your body an endocannabinoid system. And the endocannabinoid system is a series of 1 and 2 receptor systems in your organs, in your tissue, in your brain, everywhere. And it works on the limbic system, which is the system where we connect our hearts and our bodies. And when you use the phytocannabinoids from the hemp plant, this is not THC, it's not psychoactive, it's not addictive, it can be sold in all the states, it's just CBD, the phytocannabinoids. They start to trigger, when you rub them on the vulva, they start to trigger our own healing pleasure pathway of our own endocannabinoid system. They wake up the brain. They wake up that neural connection between our vulva and our brain. And then the lube, that's just to help with lubrication. And their suppositories are help with lubrication. And so I really love this. This is at pleasureprotocol.com. And if you'd like I'll have the company send you some so you can try it out. It's been a game changer.
For sure. And we'll put links to everything in our show notes too, because I think these are great resources for anyone who's looking to improve their sexual health, improve the way things go between the two of you. You know, we were talking about how a lot of the men and the ladies too, I think kind of for men, there's just this like pride around performance. You talked about this earlier.
I did. They want to do the best job and be winners.
But a lot of the women who reach out to me were like, my husband just is like, sorry, and rolls over, and we don't talk about it.
And I don't want he can't perform.
Yeah, and they're like, we don't talk about it. You know, don't want to make him feel bad. I want to make him feel uncomfortable, but like, I want him also to do something. So maybe she can have him listen to this part of the episode, and you can tell us what he does need to do.
I think what he needs to do first is get his testosterone levels checked, because we've all been hearing about how men's testosterone levels have been taking a dive. But that's directly tied to the obesity epidemic, of the fact that people are addicted to ultra-processed food, and they can't fix their obesity. There's no willpower strong enough to overcome addictions to the kinds of chemicals that are now found in our food supply. And so the obesity is definitely robbing men of their testosterone as a role of the endocrine disruptors in our air and our food and our water, etc. If you're not eating a lot of leafy green vegetables and beetroot, you're not able to convert the nitrates into nitric oxide in your system. If you use antibacterial mouthwash, but you eat all your greens and your beets, you lose the bacteria in your mouth that convert the nitrates into nitric oxide.
I did not know that.
If you take a proton pump inhibitor, an acid blocker, if you've got acid reflux and you're on Zantac or what have you, you can't make the nitric oxide that you need. And the nitric oxide is the gaseous signaling molecule that pushes the blood to your brain, to your heart, to all your parts. And so if you can't get enough blood flow in, because you don't have high enough nitric oxide supplies, that's what the PDE5 inhibitors work on. They work on nitric oxide. They help keep that path, they prop up a failing pathway. And so for men who start taking a nitric oxide supplement, often they can begin to get off of Viagra, or at least microdose it. And microdosing it does a couple of things. If they're moving from taking a 60 milligram dose down to something like 5 or 10 milligrams sublingually, rather than swallowing a pill and waiting for the liver to process it, they have to take a lot less. Once they top up their nitric oxide systems, they can still get a firm erection. You can pump a couple times a week. It draws the blood into the member, and it returns the blood carrying capacity to the penis. If he's doing it and he still can't hold the blood in during an erection, he has the most common kind of ED, which is called venous leak. And venous leak can be easily remedied by the Gaines wave treatments with the acoustic wave from the Gaines wave providers.
Wow. Where can he get the device that you just shared with us?
Yes. I have a book that I give away. It's called The Pump Guide, and you can download the PDF of this at pumpingguide.com. And it has the links and everything to the pump, the red light, all of the Gaines wave, it has all that stuff in there, and it tells you the protocol. Because for men who are familiar with pumps, they'll say, oh yeah, I tried pumping and it didn't work. And I'll say, did you use an FDA class 2 medical grade device? I mean, they're like $179. They're not expensive in the grand scheme of things to have erectile function. And he'll be like, no, I got it at an adult store. And I'm like, you got a Chinese novelty item that wasn't sized right for your needs, and it didn't have a release valve, and it didn't have a good vacuum pressure gauge, and it didn't have this, and it didn't have that. And he's like, oh, I just wasn't using a good tool. And I'm like, exactly. Yeah. So I've helped thousands of men reverse their, little wet noodle into a beautiful, amazing thing again, and even reverse that atrophy so that he is just so proud of himself. And so for the guys that have kind of given up, what they really need is nitric oxide supplementation, a penis pump, testosterone, most likely, and if needed, gains weight on top of that. And the great thing is that you can also go up from there. Like if you're like, well, I like to do it all. I want everything. What else can I do? That's where you get into PRP, stem cells, and exosomes. Because I've done PRP injections, O shots they're called, into my clitoral structure 7 times.
That sounds so painful.
It's not painful at all. You don't even feel it. Honestly, the little bit of ice that they use to numb is, you feel that a lot more than you feel that little cold up piece of ice more than you ever feel. And they can use numbing cream too. So there's a lot.
Well, Susan, I have to just say that you've probably helped thousands and thousands of people today with sharing this information. We have this taboo, this like, I don't want to ask for help. I don't want to go to a doctor about this. I don't want to talk to my spouse about this. And luckily we have someone like you who's just so comfortable and confident and normalizes all of this conversation. So I cannot thank you enough for sharing your wisdom with us here on the Chalene Show. And we will link to all of the incredible resources that you share. As I said, Bret and I stumbled upon a couple of your podcasts after meeting you at an event. And I was just like, I didn't know any of this, and it's been so fun to learn from you.
Good. It's my pleasure. And thank you for having me on, because I do really appreciate the opportunity to tell more people about these simple solutions that make such a big difference. Like when guys realize initiation is just kind of their, fire starter heavy lifting. And when women stop feeling guilty about not being able to match their man's, speed of desire, and they realize there's nothing wrong with either of you. We're just different. So we compensate for that. And then to know that there are really simple things you can do to reverse the pain, reverse the atrophy, that it's just out there available. I think that between your access to more people and this knowledge, hopefully we have reignited some great sex lives. So thank you both so much for having me.
I know we have. Sure. Absolutely. Thank you.